Hey there, e-commerce Fastlane listeners. I want to take a quick moment and give a shout out to an amazing sponsor, Absolute Web. Now, if you're looking for a powerhouse team to take your Shopify store to the next level, then look no further. Absolute Web is a full-service design and e-commerce development agency. They've been pushing the boundaries of what's possible on Shopify for over 2 decades. Now, whether you need a highly customized design that truly sets your brand apart, a complex integration to kind of streamline your operations, or even a complete site implementation from the ground up, Absolute Web has got you covered. Now, they have an in-house team of UI and UX designers. They have architects. They really are the go-to all-in-one solution for e-commerce brands that really want results and they want them now. And get this, if you're currently on another platform and you're considering to make the switch to Shopify, the experts at Absolute Web have deep experience in migrations too. They'll make the process smooth and painless, and you can start reaping all the benefits of being on Shopify. So if you're ready to build, optimize, or even scale a high-converting e-commerce storefront, head on over to absoluteweb.com and you can learn more about their extensive technical and creative e-commerce services. That's absoluteweb.com. And now back to the show.
You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder, and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Welcome back to E-commerce Fastlane. I'm your host, Steve Hutt. Thanks so much for tuning in today. There's so many podcasts out there to choose from, and I massively appreciate the fact that you're picking today's episode. You're going to gain a lot of insights. You're going to be very inspired. It's a very unique market we're going to chat about today. It doesn't sound very sexy when we talk about ERP, this enterprise resource planning, and it seems to me like just being in the Shopify world was that the word ERP really meant expensive. It meant legacy. It meant complicated. It meant extra headcount. It meant like a lot of things that went along with it. And I also maybe feel that it was a little bit of an exclusive group for people, unfortunately, because the cost factor and the implementation factor was quite expensive. And knowing that meant that it wasn't meant for everybody. And I think what's happening today, and that's where we're going to introduce my guest in a moment, who's Kyle Hensey, and he's the co-founder of a company. He's CEO and co-founder of GoodDay Software. And what GoodDay really is trying to do, I believe they're on a mission. From the research I've done, they're really trying to reinvent this ERP for modern brands. Really, it's almost like they kind of tout it as being a next generation kind of a retail operating system. So it's quite interesting. One thing I found too about GoodDay, it really sets themselves apart is kind of their operational expertise because they're former brand builders. It was really interesting. Kyle was the longtime co-founder and longtime CEO of Chubby Shorts. And, we all know this brand. It's kind of an early stage company in the Shopify ecosystem in the early days. Everybody loves their videos, and their UGC is just fantastic. And that business just continues to grow. He's also the co-founder of Loop Returns, which really initially, I believe, was built to solve Chubby's return challenges. And so interesting how that spun off into its own thing. So I'm thrilled to have Kyle today. We're going to dig into ERP for modern brands and what he's building today with GoodDay. So hi, Kyle. Welcome to E-commerce Fastlane.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And so what's interesting about you is the fact that I love the fact that you are in the weeds. You've been in the weeds for, I'm going to guess at 20 years. And so you are, and I think there's merit in that when people actually do the work and are not just a SaaS founder, were a true e-com operator and a business operator and really understood a lot of what it takes to grow and scale a business. And now moving into the SaaS world, you actually can, it's almost like a paradigm shift because now you understand what it takes to be an operator, but you also know the complexities and the challenges that operators have with their businesses. So I'd like maybe talk a little bit about that, about Chubby Shorts and the Loop, and then how GoodDay just came apart. Like, it's just like so interesting to me.
Yeah, great question. Look, I think Just to rewind a bit, I mean, GoodDay is now my third business in the Shopify ecosystem. So certainly consider myself to be incredibly thankful
Yes.
for the entire ecosystem. That's the people at Shopify. That's all the exciting brands growing up on Shopify. That's all the amazing technology partners working their tails off to support Shopify brands, right? Like
100%.
to me, as I left Chubby's after a decade there, was thinking about what I might do next. It was really simple, and I frankly had been doing it the whole time while I was at Chubby's and Loop. And that's I want to figure out how to go help as many brands as I can. And that simple idea, sent me down a lane that said, well, what were the biggest challenges that we experienced? And when I think of what's different about GoodDay because we're brand operators, I think it's because we're not only intellectually aware of the challenges here, it's that we've genuinely felt the pain points. and in some of these cases, it's really hard. We literally named the company GoodDay because this surface area, the operators are never having a good day. and we're trying to bring that sort of mentality to the space, which is to say, hey, it doesn't have to be so hard, actually. We can put a lot of effort in up front to build simple tools that are very powerful. These are inventory management tools, order management tools, purchase order management tools, you name it, in the kind of retail OS and ERP landscape. We're going after it. We want to be the central place where all of this is managed, but we're working really hard to make it easy and hopefully enjoyable ultimately. Now, I always acknowledge there's a lot of execution risk in there. This is a really complex surface area to build software. And again, that's where I'm thankful that we have such a great partner in Shopify, that we can work really closely with them. And if you look at GoodDay OS, our retail operating system, it's embedded directly into Shopify. And that alone really simplifies a lot of what makes ERP challenging.
Yeah, because that's one thing I inside Shopify, I had a partner manager in the kind of ERP world. And, and there are some connections, there are some third-party connections to a lot of these third-party ERPs out there. But I also found that the significant cost factor of, there was some basic connections that some of the people would like to these ERPs, but then what really turned out is as brands got more complex, that these kind of generic connector apps, these middleware, tended to not really work for the way a brand wanted to operate. And then they were forced to go down that journey of having to hire, some kind of an integrator or kind of platform connector companies to, and there's some great ones out there. I mean, you think of VL Omni or Fisher Technologies or N-Channel or SKU Vault or what. I mean, anyways, a whole bunch of them that their sole business is just to create middleware between these two. So you've decided to make things different. And so discuss with us about how this is actually working. Is it a public or private app, or how are we connecting APIs between the Shopify data and maybe and things like that, and then what you're capturing or having available kind of inside GoodDay? I'm just trying to understand the lay of the land.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll just start at the beginning and share the vision for what we're seeing, because I think it'll help you understand why we've made some of these decisions. So remember, we're coming from spending over a decade building a really special brand, where we spent nearly $1 million in 3 years building out a really complex set of operating tools on top of NetSuite. So we've seen the pain of that experience, but we've also seen the power of those systems. And so when we looked at that experience, we said, okay, how can we take the painful elements of this and remove them? So our surface area that we're trying to attack is to become a full-blown alternative to NetSuite. So for these retail brands, that's both a retail operating system and a financial platform built into one system. All right. Today, a year into development, right, we raised $6 million just over a year ago from some really special venture capitalists that we've been friends with for a long time, who saw the same vision. And we hired an engineering team. We put our heads down. We have a lot of clarity around what we're building and how we're building it. But we're now a year into the retail operating system build. So the 20 customers who have signed up with us already, they're signing up primarily for the retail operating system and the promise of the financial platform in the future. Now, when you think of the retail operating system itself, we're building our own independent company, of course, where GoodDay's core logic, where our APIs, where our integrations, all of those things live, are all independent of Shopify. Now, the user interfaces that brands interface with our technology are fully in Shopify. They're embedded into the admin of Shopify. So from a user's perspective, it feels very much like an extension of Shopify's capabilities. And that's by design. That's not random, right? Like, we really trust the Shopify team. They've clearly dominated this entire market. We talk about it internally. We say our entire market is any Shopify brands.
Yeah.
So we genuinely think about it like that. And what that means is that we can really simplify elements of what we're doing from a user interface. I'll give you an example. The market leader, again, is NetSuite. The UI and UX of that particular system is notoriously old,
Horrible,
and not ideal.
Right.
So much so that users don't want to use it. So to us, when we started with some pretty simple design principles, we said, well, in this space, actually, if we just show up with Shopify's Polaris design frameworks and we focus on making the systems feel familiar, man, I bet we can get a lot more user adoption into these sort of systems. I bet we don't require as much manual upload throughout the system if we think like this, right? And so in many ways, we're using a lot of the tools that Shopify's built, but then we're working really, really hard to find really unique ways where we're extending the operating capabilities. Some of those pretty interesting ones, I think, are how to manage inventory that's off Shopify inventory, but inside of GoodDay. How to manage wholesale. Pre-books being a really big pain point for Shopify merchants that are maturing and wanting to lean into, selling through retailers. Our tools are the sorts of tools you need to make those things easy. And so if I just zoom out and say, okay, what is the GoodDay team trying to accomplish? We're trying to bring a lot of the same principles that Shopify has brought to the commerce platform world to ERP. We want it to be business user friendly. We want it to be really lightweight in nature. You mentioned this up front. Interconnectivity is our responsibility. We're going to go build your connections for you, either via our APIs or just good old fashioned roll up your sleeves and go build these things in the early days, right? Again, we're a year into this. Like there's a lot under the hood that we'll need to get a lot better over time. But the intention there is to make ERP easier for these brands. It's simply a year into it, I'm convinced. It simply shouldn't be so complex.
You said so things are going on inside the Shopify admin. So, and you mentioned a few things about like inventory and a few other things that it currently does. What I'm trying to, I guess, contrast the difference, because there's going to be people right now that's saying, hey, I'm currently kind of duct taping some things together. It's certainly from an inventory perspective, either through spreadsheets or other dedicated apps and things and all that kind of stuff. And so you're suggesting that maybe in lieu of that you're building something more streamlined, kind of pre-built into the admin. And so is this some kind of a private app that kind of gets, or is it a sales channel? I'm just trying to understand kind of where it resides. And then I'm trying to contrast the native Shopify functionality and then how you're enhancing it.
That's exactly right. It's a private app in Shopify. When you download it from the Shopify App Store, it will go into the bottom left of your admin and you'll have a navigation the same way you would in any software system. Currently, this is item management, purchase orders, vendor management, receiving, inventory management, wholesale, right? Those are the big modules that are the core pieces of our retail operating system today. And that's why people are coming to us, right? So if I can just talk specifically about inventory management, if you have 3 SKUs and you're selling 100% of those through Shopify, Shopify is an unbelievable inventory manager for that. It's the most efficient. It's incredibly powerful. You absolutely do not need a system like GoodDay. If you have 1,000 SKUs, 5 sales channels, 12 suppliers, the matrix complexity that you begin to take on will overwhelm the out-of-the-box system like Shopify. And so for us, we are the extending of those capabilities. And when you look at the combination of what Shopify does for you and what GoodDay extends those operating capabilities, the combination of those two things for us is the equivalent or better, certainly more efficient than what you would do if you were on Shopify and NetSuite.
How do you think about other tech partners that are part of a brand's experience? Because clearly a lot of brands think, okay, yeah, I can add this thing on, but do you play nicely with my existing pieces of technology in the Shopify ecosystem? So I just kind of throw that back to you and saying are you intentionally wanting to and are working well with others in the ecosystem? And then what do you see as the best kind of connections? But because there's certainly like, hey, am I using Klaviyo or OmniSend, or I'm using Nosto for personalization, or I just want to make sure that because that's one of the pushback I always get when I kind of recommend a new solution is they're like, hey, we already have these pieces of technology. Are they all going to talk nicely to each other when needed? So just curious on that.
Well, I think it's a great question. The intention in the long-term strategy is to be the most interoperable and open ecosystem that we can be. And again, we didn't come up with that ourselves. We saw the power of that with Shopify. But if you now zoom into the area we're working really hard to disrupt, ERP, it's a notoriously closed ecosystem. And so in particular, in Shopify's ecosystem, I think we have a huge role in supporting other WMS players. I think we have a huge role in supporting RMA players like Loop Returns. I think there's a bunch of other interesting systems that we want to build long-term partnerships with where we'll stick to what we're great at. And we'll work to find unique ways we can partner with them to make their product even better for merchants. For me, I look at even pretty direct competitors like a Fulfill, and I say, man, that's a great alternative to NetSuite for a lot of brands. We operate differently. We're a little bit down market, but I want to make sure anybody who's innovating in this world has some space to do it and centers the merchant.
It sounds like there's a blue ocean out there of opportunity just because, like I said, at the top of the show, that it's cost prohibitive, and then just the investment of having to have a middleware to sync these two. Once you're at that level, the headcount and overall, it's just the complexities just go through the roof. And I'm glad that you're solving that natively kind of inside Shopify and then working towards the financial side of the business too. Because I think that's another opportunity that I could see where people, wow, we can deal with inventory and wholesale and PO and these sorts of things, and all that's important from an inventory perspective. But then on the flip side, it's like, well, what about like profitability by SKU and forecasting models and all the other things that could come out of the financial side of an ERP? So I'm glad there's some future proof happening with that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just call out that I partnered with GoodDay with Dave Wardell, who is my 10-year CFO and right-hand person at Chubby's. He's a CPA and accountant. So everything, he's GoodDay's chief product officer. Everything we've built into the retail operating system today is in service of making accounting really seamless and a lot easier. So as I think about our long-term journey, we're just at the precipice of starting to unlock some of that value. So I would just call out that I think this idea of simplifying the operating tools feels very obvious inside of the retail operating system to me as a former operator. I think it's less obvious to folks on the outside how much can be simplified in the financial stack as well. And so I would argue that we have as much or more work to do there to build some special tools.
I actually looked at the website kind of before recording today too, and I see quite a few case studies of people that have kind of, I guess, you mentioned you have 20 some early companies that have made a decision to try you. I see Poncho, Mugsy, I see here, the Normal brand. I see lots of different really neat companies that have made decisions to be with you and throw their hat in the ring, so to speak. So I'm just curious if you can call out one of the brands that you work with and said, hey, here's what they used to do, and they got introduced to us, and now here's their life today because of our solution. Which would love to hear that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start by saying of the 20 or so customers we have today, 19 out of 20 of them manage their business on Shopify, or 20 of 20 manage their business on Shopify. 19 of 20 manage their business on Excel spreadsheets, a handful of operating point solutions, and QuickBooks.
Okay.
So the uniformity of that in this ecosystem is pretty wild. So as we think about people who are an ideal fit for us, really what we're doing is we're working with folks who are in spreadsheets and a handful of point solutions that typically are doing pretty powerful things for the brands, but they're also typically siloing a lot of valuable operating data. And so the experience and the reason that people are coming to GoodDay is that they want to take all the stuff out of the disconnected spreadsheets. They want to take all the stuff out of the 2 or 3 or 4, point solutions, an inventory management system over here, a WMS over here, RMA over here, like you name it. There's 100 different combinations of that. And let's simplify that whole set of tooling and get it into one centralized arena. I asked in the build up to our seed financing announcement, I asked a bunch of our customers just open-ended question, why is GoodDay the thing you chose? And the primary theme was that this was the first time they've been operating in a world where their data was centralized so that anybody who wanted to go get it and see it, could both access it and trust that it was cleansed and accurate and trustworthy and reliable. And that last part is really easy to say and really, really challenging to do. And I think if you really zero in and say, like, what is the big difference between maintaining a system like this versus having a network of spreadsheets? If you work really hard to maintain the integrity of the data, you'll get more and more power out of a system, right? With the spreadsheets, the more complexity you add to it, the harder it gets to manage. And so that's what we've been seeing with our brands. And I'll call out one of them specifically, pretty large brand, men's apparel brand, which we have a lot of, given my experience with Chubbies, is they had a really impressive, their operators are so impressive to me. They built out like really, really sophisticated set of operating tools in Google Sheets that was genuinely challenging for us to replace. We spent weeks and weeks and weeks getting there.
Yeah.
And seeing them now in the system doing far more complex things than they ever thought, and them being so engaged and feeling so much power from the system is really rewarding. But I call them out because we learn a lot from every one of these brands. And I do think if you zero in on the people trying to innovate in ERP, this is one of the areas where we're going to be very differentiated. We're working in the trenches with these brands and learning from them all the time. This particular brand has specifically one item that's currently on our Q4 roadmap. We learned from that specific spreadsheet. It was you only needed to see it once to see that it was interesting. And now we're going to make it accessible to thousands of brands. That's the power of building in this ecosystem and really getting in the trenches with these brands. You can learn a ton. And now in our case, with such a strong engineering team, we can build scalable products that can benefit thousands of brands.
I love when you kind of can research and reach out to your customers and ask them like what's working well and what's missing. And the front line feedback, and then adding that to, I'd say, a public roadmap, but it's nice that you're being open. And once again, they're paying customers and these are their pain points. You're solving a lot of them for them. That's why they're with you. But, and by the way, what about this? And then having an engineering team and the brain power behind it all. I mean, that's fantastic. You can iterate quickly as possible and implement things specifically for one brand. But then you're right, it branches out into all of them. It's available like company wide for anybody to use. I think that's fantastic. Question about sweet spot, because I think that's whenever I talk to a SaaS founder building product, a lot of times there is a certain size or complexity of a business where it becomes useful and impactful, and so an ERP, just, as the old school legacy word, it seems like it really is for the enterprise. And that's not the feeling I get from GoodDay. So is there any brand where this is not applicable other than like the 3SKU brand? Other than that, is this like pretty much open for anybody to enjoy and get value from?
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions about ERP. And I think it's also connected to the legacy players in the space. These tools have been reserved for brands that are 100, 200 million in revenue and above, and kind of quarantined off into the group of people who can pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for systems.
Yep.
So the contrarian point of view when we started working on this, 18 months ago was, do we actually think that smaller brands are that much less complex? Or is there some other reason that these tools aren't being presented to them? And my instincts as a brand operator was, well, man, when we were 8 million in sales, our business was very complex. I wish this sort of thing existed.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've been learning. If I just look at our existing customers, the smallest one is around 2 million in sales. Largest one is creeping up in the kind of 70 to 80 million in sales range. So it's a pretty broad range. I think I always tell folks, look, if you have a brand that's growing, it's on Shopify, it's growing at an accelerated rate. If you're not already complex, you're about to become complex. And these systems will probably make sense. But for the most part, what I've learned 15 months into building this is that truly all of this comes down to how complex are your operating flows in your business. And specifically, when you begin to plan for, move, and manage inventory through your company, how complex is that set of processes? One sales channel, one SKU, etc., not a great fit for us. You start to add sales channels, that alone will add a lot of complexity. And so I really do think people should be revisiting these sorts of tools in this era, mostly because they can be a lot more lightweight, one, And then two, we have a vision for this, and this always frustrated me in our experience with Chubby's. These systems hold some of the most valuable operating data that you can have inside of a business. And if you built a contextually aware system on top of it that said, hey, if this is true over here, I think this operator should go check into this, or even recommend like, hey, this SKU right here is, given the last 4 weeks of sales, this SKU right here is likely to be out of stock in the next 2 weeks, right? There's some simple things you can do by just building this specific for Shopify retailers that can really make the systems proactive. And that's one of the big, I think when I zoom out 5 years from today and we're looking back at GoodDay, I think that piece of this, like the contextually aware stuff that we're building, will be one of the most interesting things that we've brought to market. And we're doing this for small businesses. They literally can't afford to hire the extra people. And so they're going to need some added help here.
How do you price the product? Because, obviously different size businesses will have, I would assume, based on order volume, and, their current complexities and things like that. I know you're connected through a private app and, that's syncing all the data correctly, but how do you eventually, if someone was to come on board, I know we'll talk about an offer at the end of the show today, but for those that want to try the solution, but like at the end of the day, it's like, I don't see any pricing on the website. So I'm just curious, it's kind of like, what would the investment be for someone?
It's admittedly a work in progress. It's just very early for us, and we're working so closely with all of our early customers. A part of the vision here is to drastically reduce the total cost of ownership of these systems. I do think that a part of the reason the long tail of brands isn't using these tools is because they've been priced out, right? And so we are trying to solve that as a part of our solution. In general, the way we've thought about this, we want to price very, very friendly with these brands early, not dissimilar from Shopify. We have a monthly subscription based off of revenue. As the revenue grows, we grow with it, but at a lower rate. We also have a lot of planned parts of our future system that won't necessarily make sense for everybody. And so they're not actually a part of the core system, and they'll be offered as a la carte options. And so we'll have two vectors across which we'll be growing with our existing customers. One is we're just helping them be more profitable, resilient businesses, and they're growing. And the secondary one is we're going to actually offer more and more to the system over time. But like in turn, to give you just like a range and a mentality and a philosophy, the thing I talk about the team all the time is I want our system to be 70% dislocated in price relative to NetSuite, which is the market leader in Shopify.
I see.
So I don't want to be 7% dislocated.
Yeah.
And that's
a lot. Yeah.
That's not a random number. Like I built a brand for 10 years. I have a lot of perspective on what I think is fair for these sorts of tools. But I hope what comes through that is nothing but we want to be incredibly valuable to these brands.
Yeah.
We do that with price, but we mostly do that with the power of the product we're bringing to market.
Right. Well, I think your website, clearly articulates that about, making better, faster operational decisions, like scaling businesses and profitability around that. And currently it has to do with inventory and wholesale and PO and this sort of logic around all of that. And I think that's definitely a challenge for a lot of brands with the systems and processes that they currently have to do manually. You help solve that instantly. So there's an instant ROI out of that. So I think that's fantastic. So my last question for you is, so it's clear that you're building something very unique and you're making it accessible, I think, for brands where ERP is not accessible. It certainly, at least it appears that way for brands, just it's a cost prohibitive. And then, like I mentioned, this middleware and all the craziness that goes along with the engineering to manage it. You've solved a lot of that and continue to iterate on that. So if people are listening today saying, hey, this is interesting to me, and I do want to improve some efficiencies with my inventory and my forecasting and wholesale and POs and all that. And I know natively Shopify is okay, but not great. But you're solving this now because you're an operator. You kind of get it and getting great feedback from your current customers. What are the next steps? And I understand you may have an offer for those listening today of saying, hey, I want to kick the tires and actually try this solution. What do you say to them today?
Yeah, if you go to our site, which is gooddaysoftware.com, you can go on there and book a demo directly with me. We're putting all of our resources into engineers to build great products. So I'm currently doing every demo, which I love. I get to meet the best brands every day.
Love it.
And just as a part of that journey and a part of appreciating y'all, we want to give 3 free months if you sign up with us. And that's really meant to make sure that we get the systems in place. We get you gathering value from the system before you ever think about spending $1 in our direction. And so that's fair to us. We are continuing to work really deeply with these brand partners. So I would just say, we'll be asking you for your perspective. We'll show you future designs of what we want to build. And so it is a little bit of a different experience than, signing up for an app in the Shopify App Store. So just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, that's lovely. So I'll have ecommercefastlane.com/GoodDay. That's going to redirect to the landing page with this 3-month offer. You can book a demo there and kind of go through that whole process and just learn more, dig right into it and see what this solution can do. GoodDaySoftware.com is the main URL. Just once again, thanks, Kyle, for coming on the show. This is very, very interesting to me because you are building something that once again, I've not had NetSuite or Microsoft Dynamics or other types of ERPs. I've not ever had them on the show because I just felt it was not accessible to the 1%. And you're clearly building something that's really for the 95% of these, SMBs that are on Shopify. And I think that's fantastic. I love the direction you're going, and I wish you tremendous success. I'm looking forward to next year's recording again to see how things are going and how you pivot into the financial side of the GoodDay OS. So once again, thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Have yourself a great day.
All right. You too. Bye.
Or in your case, have a good day.
Yes. You did it. You're feeling it.
You got it. All right. See you later.
All right. Bye.
Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.